Welcome back to Analysis. Last week, the Financial Times reported that Theresa May, the Home Secretary, is seeking to make plans to overturn the International Human Rights Convention, which stipulates that citizenship is a right, so that British terrorist suspects can have their citizenship revoked, even if they have no other citizenship, in effect making them stateless. We contacted the Home Office. They refused to confirm this specific report, but gave us the following statement. We are determined to detect and disrupt all terrorist threats and take action against those we believe pose a national security risk. Citizenship is a privilege, not a right, and the Home Secretary will remove British citizenship from any individuals where she feels it is conducive to the public good to do so. Currently, the Home Secretary already has the power to take away the citizenship of those with dual nationality, and since coming to power, May has exercised these powers by confiscating the passports of 16 British citizens who are alleged terror suspects. However, by extending these powers to take away the citizenship of British citizens who have no other citizenship elsewhere in the world, would put the UK into the same category as countries like Zimbabwe or Myanmar, which have revoked the rights of citizenship in an attempt to repress political dissent or to target Muslim communities, respectively. So is Britain becoming a repressive state? Or is it fair to say that someone does not deserve the privileges of citizenship if their actions are indeed, in the words of Theresa May, seriously prejudicial to the interests of the UK? Joining me in the studio to discuss all this are Bill Bowring, Professor of Law at Birkbeck College, University of London, and Alice K. Ross, reporter at the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. Welcome. Let me start with you, Alice Ross. I mean, 16 times Theresa May has done this. Is this something that's kind of unique to the new coalition government since 2010, or did the Labour government do the same thing as well?
Well, the British government has always had the ability to remove the citizenship of individuals who it believes are guilty of, for example, treason. But the last deprivation of citizenship order before the modern era, before the counter-terrorism became such a priority for the government, was in 1973. Now, the Labour government rewrote the rules, enabling them to take away the citizenship of people who they believed were guilty of terrorism offences in 2003. And in the 7 years between then and when Labour left power, they used the powers a further 4 times, so 5 orders in total. Since coming to power, actually, the latest figures that we have show that the Home Secretary has used the powers 21 times. So that's 21 times under the coalition government. And that, to us, certainly indicates that this is a power that the government is seizing on.
Is there any redress? I mean, can a person appeal through the law courts and go to the Supreme Court to say that what the Home Secretary is doing is unjust?
Yes, absolutely they can. They can, where they're losing their citizenship on grounds of terrorism, where there may be secret evidence required, they can appeal through the SIAC courts, which are courts which can hear secret evidence, and then they can appeal up through the Court of Appeal and then through the Supreme Court. But this process can take years, and these orders are often made when individuals are outside the country, so they're effectively stranded overseas, unable to return for periods of years as they fight their cases. And we've only seen a tiny handful of cases that have succeeded. And where they have succeeded, they've succeeded on grounds of statelessness. So a tiny number of individuals, 1 or 2, have managed to successfully appeal against the orders on grounds of statelessness. And now, if the Home Secretary is proposing to take away those grounds, well, then that takes away one of the routes of appeal for people.
Well, Bill, I mean, is there any legitimate occasion in which a government could, in fact, say citizenship has to be revoked? I mean,
well, what really struck me looking at the statement received from the Home Office, which you just referred to, and was on the screen there, also, is it's quite clear that this is a punishment, actually, and it's followed then by the phrase that it's conducive to the public good. And imposing on somebody a punishment which renders them stateless, actually, and there's a really strong presumption in international law that people should not be stateless for every conceivable reason. So how can this be conducive to the public good? It seems to me that there's a failure of logic amongst many other things. And I think as a punishment, which is what this is. It's a punishment for people suspected. So, really, it's a great shame, as a matter of fact, that this is something which has cross-party support, and which the Labour Party was doing under previous Home Secretaries. So, unfortunately, there seems to be a consistent policy which has been followed. But I repeat, it's punishment.
They could go on to say that if somebody is convicted of a terrorist offence, they also would be denied citizenship, even though most of them are put in prison for such a long period of time, they wouldn't ever have a chance to exercise.
Well, I think if somebody's convicted of terrorism,
yeah,
they're going to be in prison for an extremely long time.
Yeah, so it becomes a bit academic whether they really would have a chance to become
but of course, if, for example, there's an order that a person should be deported following their term of imprisonment, then, of course, the government and previous governments too have run into human rights problems, because where do you deport them to? And if you deport them to somewhere where they're going to be killed or tortured, equally that cannot be done.
Well, what about this international practice? I mean, we mentioned Zimbabwe and Myanmar. I mean, are other countries increasingly doing this, or is it fair to say Britain would be unique, along with Zimbabwe and Myanmar, to do this?
Well, I wouldn't know about whether it's an increasing practice, but in recent years, Bahrain has revoked the citizenship of a number of dissidents.
And what about other European countries, members of the European Union?
The European countries, I'm not sure. I'm not aware of any cases of it happening. Certainly, the US has developed case law saying that the United States government cannot revoke the citizenship of any of its nationals, apart from in cases of, I believe, fighting for other armed forces with the express intention of giving up your United States citizenship. So in the United States, citizenship is viewed as something which is actually your right, not a privilege. And I want to go back to that language that Theresa May used, that the Home Office used in that statement, that citizenship is a right, a privilege, not a right. Well, actually, a number of the individuals who have had their citizenship removed have been born inside the United Kingdom. We've come across 5 cases where individuals born in the United Kingdom have then lost their citizenship. And actually, you could argue that in those cases, their citizenship is a right, not a privilege.
Well, you would agree with that?
Absolutely, yes.
I mean,
it's always been something we've been proud of in this country, that if you're born here, you are a citizen. No question about that.
So you don't acquire it because of good behaviour, just by virtue of birth. You get
yes, birth on this territory.
So
exactly.
it is outrageous, really, isn't it, to say that it's a privilege?
Well, I mean, certainly in those cases where individuals have been born here, yes, I mean, it is their right. Most disturbingly, one of the individuals who was born here and went on to lose his citizenship was later killed by a US drone in Somalia. So you're looking at very serious consequences. And his parents have argued that he was left stateless. I mean, his parents are from an Egyptian family, but they argued that their son held a British passport. He was brought up in Britain. He never, took any steps to claim Egyptian citizenship, and yet he was vulnerable to a deprivation of citizenship order, and they believe that this then contributed to him being targeted by a drone. And that shows quite how severe the implications of losing your citizenship can be. We've come across 2 cases where people have been killed in drone strikes, and a further case where an individual has been a victim of extraordinary rendition to the United States. He's an individual called Mahdi Hashi, who's still in jail awaiting terrorism charges in the United States, and that is as a direct consequence of the loss of his British citizenship.
Well, we've just been joined, I'm told, by Hisham Yeza on Skype. Are you there, Hisham Yeza?
Yes, thank you for having me.
Oh, on the phone. Can you hear us?
On the phone, yes.
Yes, I believe you've got particular personal experience of this whole issue. Could you tell us what happened to you?
Well, actually, I did research on the topic. I mean, I personally did have issues with. I was arrested a few years back when I was working on a radical Islam PhD with a fellow friend at university, and I was arrested, and there was an attempt to deport me as a result because I'm not a British national, so it's a sort of a different case. But my interest in the issues predates that, and has been in various capacities, but. In my work, when I looked at the issue, the speakers have, the other speakers have said pretty much, they've covered the ground, and I would add that Australia is one of the countries that has used this race, principle to try and basically wash its hands of one of its citizens who was detained in Guantanamo Bay, in the early months after the September 11 attacks. And I think, in my view, the key question really is what this move by the government means in terms of how it sees the alien community as it sees them. There's a clear, fault line being built between what is deemed, the native community and the, outside and foreign alien community, because the implication in stripping somebody out, of their citizenship is that somehow this is some sort of, as has been said, privilege that is given to them by sort of, the true, the true custodians of British nationality who give and take that privilege to others who come into this country. I mean, there's no question of stripping nationality of out of people who have nowhere else to go. I mean, the assumption always when these discussions are being had, and I've had a few with people, and usually it always boils down to if these people are not happy, they should go back to where they came from.
Well, you mentioned Guantanamo Bay. I mean, there were British citizens in Guantanamo Bay, and I think there's still one at least still there. And
well, Sheikh Amr.
Yes, in spite of that, the British government would make sort of representations to the US, perhaps not very vigorously, but saying these people are British citizens and so on. Under this new doctrine, they would just sort of wash their hands of them and say, well, they're in Guantanamo Bay, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, this law, this legal tool, is just one more in the arsenal of the government to try and wash its hands of people who have been detained in Guantanamo, completely against the rule of law, who have been cleared to release. And we heard some extraordinary revelations in last night's Newsnight program, which I urge all your viewers to go and watch on the iPlayer, regarding to why the British authorities are still not doing what they can to get Sheikh Amr released from Guantanamo, despite the fact he's been cleared, despite the fact he's never been charged with anything. But to go back quickly to the issue of Theresa May's this new development, I think it's another step in the direction of criminalising and victimising one particular community in the UK, and try and making them feel that they are essentially guilty until proven otherwise, and they have to essentially.
Yeah. Okay, but Bill, I mean, it is a bit of a reversal, isn't it? Because I mean, Britain has always accepted the concept of dual nationality. There are some countries that don't accept that, and we were sort of on the liberal side of the international spectrum. This basically is saying dual nationality may soon end as a concept that Britain recognises, isn't it?
But the UN Charter, I mean, Theresa May is wrong in the first instance when she says it's a privilege and not a right. The UN Human Declarations of Human Rights explicitly says, in I believe Article 15, that everyone has the right to nationality and nobody should be deprived arbitrarily of their nationality and of their right to change nationality. And there's nothing more arbitrary than a government, for reasons of political expediency, using this weapon to try and just basically victimize one particular part of the community to suit a particular ideological agenda. All right,
let me just ask Bill that same point. I mean, dual nationality, do you think it is now a very vulnerable concept?
I think it's the other way around, isn't it? That somebody who has dual nationality is particularly vulnerable to having their British citizenship taken away. I think that is the point. And of course, the outrage at the present moment is the fact that people who don't have any other nationality would be rendered stateless. But I'm sure there are cases which you've come across where, the fact that somebody has another nationality is part of the pretext for removing their...
Well, absolutely. I mean, so far, it's, in the cases that we've looked at to date, the only individuals whose citizenship they can take away are dual nationals. But a number of people who've been victim to these orders have been able to say, well, actually, we're not dual nationals. I don't hold another citizenship. So it's been a real subject of debate, and it's been one of the only grounds on which people have managed to successfully appeal against deprivation, against the loss of their citizenship. So what these proposed changes, and I should add that at the moment we've got very little detail about what these proposed changes are, when they're mooted to come in, and what sort of shape they might take. But what these proposed changes would do is effectively remove a barrier to Theresa May in removing citizenship. One thing that I would say as well is that a lot of the time, when they're terrorism grounds, when people are being accused of terrorism offences here, what these orders effectively do is they use immigration as a means to treat supposedly criminal or alleged criminal offences. So that rather than putting someone on a criminal trial where you have to reach a very high burden of proof, what these orders instead do is that they mean that they make it an immigration matter. So they go through courts which have a lower boundary of proof. They go through courts which can use secret evidence. So it's a real sort of blurring of the lines between nationality and criminal activity.
But the Home Secretary already has the power to block entry by people, not citizens, but foreigners, into this country under the same rubric of not conducive to the public good.
Yes, but every country does that, actually, by the way, and nobody has a right to enter any country other than their own. So I think that, in a sense, that can be, of course, controversial, but it's perfectly normal.
Well, what about, do you have a right to leave a country? I mean, there have been cases, haven't there, when the government thinks that somebody is going to join a jihad operation somewhere else in the world and block them from going out there, have they? Or do they just wait till they come back and then stop them coming back in?
You've asked me something I don't have an immediate answer to, but from what I know, I would say that, first of all, that there is no actual... They can stop people leaving, of course, where there are criminal proceedings or for that kind of a reason. In general, there aren't checks, so people do leave all the time. What this country does do, of course, is to alert the authorities in the place they're going to frequently so that they get picked up. Just something else which I think is not unimportant. Many countries take the question of citizenship very seriously and, for example, prohibit the extradition of their citizens to foreign countries. In this country, we have no such rule, and we happily extradite British citizens in very controversial circumstances, for example, to the United States, as we know. So I think there are many issues, and going back to where we started, of course, part of the problem being that we don't have a constitution in this country.
So citizenship is really quite a fragile concept, as Bill's saying. I mean,
yeah, in the United Kingdom,
Britain,
citizenship is quite a vague concept, and it's something which we've seen the courts struggle with time and time again when they're dealing with these cases, and they've ended up coming up with a sort of framework for what a citizen is, but that's not a legal entitlement necessarily in the same way as, for example, the United States Constitution guarantees its citizens. So it is quite a vague concept.
Didn't it all begin a little bit under David Blunkett when he was Labour Home Secretary on the issue of naturalisation? People, who lived here after 5 years or whatever it is and have the right to become British citizens because of long stay and family connections and so on. Then now they have to go through these ceremonies to sort of prove they can speak English and they understand the British system and so on. So already the idea that citizenship is something that we give to you, you've got to learn how to be a good citizen, isn't that already there and brought in by Labour?
Well, you could certainly argue that, and what I would say is that the advent of these orders and certainly the increase in these orders represents a fundamental sort of renegotiation of the relationship between the government and the individual. If the government is using citizenship as a punishment or as a gift, as a token for good behaviour, then that's certainly interesting.
Do you think the whole talk that Theresa May is coming up with now is just a smokescreen because of recent cases where the government sort of seem to have failed on certain issues, and it's part of a sort of to get the tabloids excited and make it look as though the government is sort of taking firm action and robust and so on?
I wouldn't say it's a smokescreen, you see. The thing is that these are real measures she's talking about which will have real impact on actual people. So, of course, I think the government wants to look tough. And so there have been a variety of things, one being these ill-fated lorries, advertisement lorries, which they've had to withdraw. But all of these are actual real measures, I think, which are part of a not only a desire, but a real intention to get very tough on a whole range of issues. And the background to which is that we could well get out of the European system for protection of human rights. So when she comes up with these measures, it's part of what she and the Minister of Justice, Chris Grayling, were talking about at the Conservative Party conference.
Well, Hisham Yazza, are you still there? I'm not sure if Hisham Yazza is still there.
I can hear you.
Oh, yes, okay. I mean, was this something that the tabloids were demanding, this idea of citizenship as a privilege, or has Theresa May come up with it sort of without a lot of pressure in the media?
Well, it's a bit of both. I mean, the way that these things happen is there's always, a sort of a feedback loop between the press and the politicians, and she's trying to say and do what she thinks will play well in the court of public media, and the media are doing the same in the sense that these measures are exactly fine-tuned to tap into the very the paranoia and the mindset that is being created by media stories that sort of paint this picture of this imminent danger from within. And this isn't new. This is just the latest step in a process that has been taking place in it for a very long time. Demonizing the Muslim community and victimizing its members and making everyone feel that they're never ever assured of their place and they're never as British as the next person. No matter how long they've lived here, no matter how many generations they go back, they'll always be guests here at the whim and can be deported and can be removed. Their citizenship is just some sort of gift from their fellow white Britons, for lack of a better word, as long as they behave, which is in